What happens when those sworn to protect America cross the line into criminality? Tonight on Criminal Diaries, we dive deep into the secret files of CIA officers who broke bad. From double agents to courtroom confessions, these are the stories of insiders who swapped their oaths for prison sentences. Each case reveals not just a fall from grace, but the hidden dangers lurking within the agency itself. Get ready as we expose the betrayals, the cover-ups, and the stunning downfalls of CIA's own. Case 1. Alan D. Fears, Jr. From 1984 to 86, Alan Fears commanded the CIA's Central America Task Force, quietly bankrolling contra-guerrillas while Congress shouted, "No." When independent counsel Lawrence Walsh pried open Iran-Contra, Fears flipped. In July 1991, he pled guilty to 2 misdemeanors for hiding the arms for hostages diversion from Capitol Hill. Judge Aubrey Robinson credited extraordinary cooperation, sentencing him in January 1992 to 1 year of probation and 100 hours of community service. No bars, no fine. Yet the paper trail he supplied helped convict higher-ranking plotters, and his plea shredded Langley's claim it had only played a bit part. President George H.W. Bush's Christmas Eve 1992 pardon erased even that wrist slap. But Fears' name is forever welded to the moment the CIA admitted it had lied to the people it served. Case 2. Aldrich Hazen Ames. Ames drank bourbon, drove a Jaguar, and fed Moscow a gold mine. Starting in 1985, the veteran counterintelligence officer sold the KGB every Soviet asset the CIA controlled, more than 20 names for an initial $50,000 cash drop. Over 9 years, he banked $2.7 million, the largest haul any American spy had taken, while at least 10 betrayed informants were executed. FBI surveillance finally snapped shut on February 21, 1994. Ames and his wife Rosario were arrested leaving their Arlington home. Both confessed within hours. Ames received life without parole. Rosario, 5 years for laundering blood money. Today, prisoner number 40, 1087-083, serves his sentence in Terre Haute. His treachery still cited in CIA training manuals as the quintessential warning that the deadliest mole may be the man who knows all your defenses. Case 3. Alan Lawrence Pope. The Cold War's deniable pilot, Alan Pope, had already flown secret runs over Laos and China when the CIA loaned him to Indonesia's Permesta rebels in 1958. On May 18, his B-26 went down in flames. Indonesian troops pulled him from the wreckage with maps, mission logs, and U.S.-made bombs. A Jakarta court condemned him to death in 1960 for killing 23 soldiers and civilians. Behind the scenes, Robert F. Kennedy bargained hard. C-130 transports, quiet promises, and face-saving diplomacy. Sukarno commuted the sentence to house arrest. 4 years after capturing Pope, walked free in July 1962, swapped for aircraft the Indonesians desperately needed for. He flew clandestine missions again, proof that the agency's air arm keeps resurrecting its ghosts, but the shootdown exposed early CIA paramilitary reach and left Washington scrambling to explain how an American tourist was strafing an ally's troops. Case 4. Andrew Marvin Warren. Recruited for his flawless Arabic and streetwise charm, Warren rocketed to Algiers station chief by 2007. Off-duty, he mixed apple martinis laced with Xanax, filmed semi-conscious women, and bragged he was untouchable behind diplomatic plates. 2 victims defied stigma, reporting rapes in the late 2008. A joint state justice probe raided Warren's U.S. apartment, uncovering pistols, cocaine, and explicit videos. Warren pleaded guilty in 2010 to abusive sexual contact and drug-fueled gun possession. Judge Ellen Huvel noted his CIA past but stressed the need to protect women everywhere, handing down 65 months in federal prison and lifetime sex offender status, nearly double prosecutors' request. The case rattled Langley, prompting new vetting rules for overseas chiefs and a blunt lesson. The same clandestine skills that recruit agents can just as easily groom victims. Case 5. Bernard Barker. A Havana-born saboteur who strafed Castro's beaches in 1961, Macho Barker kept fighting long after the Bay of Pigs. In June 1972, he joined ex-CIA comrades to break into Democratic National Headquarters, planting mics for the Nixon White House. The burglars were caught hiding in a closet. Barker's notebook listed hush money payoffs. He pled guilty that January and drew up to 6 years, but Judge John Sirica slashed the term after 18 months when Barker agreed to testify against the higher-ups. Released from Danbury in 1974, Barker told reporters he'd merely followed orders. Yet Watergate proved how ex-operatives, steeped in covert action, could import clandestine tactics into domestic politics, with constitutional-shaking results. Case 6. Claire E. George. As Deputy Director for Operations, Claire George oversaw every covert asset worldwide, then lied to Congress to keep Iran-Contra's arms pipeline hidden. Indicted on 10 counts in 1991, his first trial ended in mistrial. Retried in late 1992, jurors convicted him of 2 felonies for false statements and perjury. He faced up to 10 years and $250,000 in fines. Before sentencing, President Bush wielded the pardon pen, erasing George's conviction on December 24, 1992. Langley veterans cheered. Oversight hawks fumed. The non-sentence left a troubling precedent. In the clash between secrecy and accountability, political clemency can shield the gatekeepers who choose silence over truth. Case 7. David A. Passero. At Afghanistan's Asadabad fire base in June 2003, CIA contractor David Passero, ex-Green Beret, self-styled interrogation expert, took detainee Abdul Wali into a dark cell and beat him with flashlight blows, kicks, and boots for 2 nights. Wali collapsed and died. Legal gray zones vanished when the Justice Department charged Passero under a little-used USA Patriot Act provision extending U.S. criminal law to overseas facilities. A North Carolina jury convicted him in 2006 of assault, causing serious bodily injury. Judge Terrence Boyle imposed 100 months, the first federal prison term for wartime detainee abuse. Passero's orange jumpsuit sent a stark signal through covert ranks. Enhanced interrogation might blur ethics, but murder still meets a jury. Case 8. David Henry Barnett. Debt-ridden after a failed Jakarta business venture, case officer David Barnett approached the KGB in 1976, selling Indonesia's entire CIA order of battle, including the identities of 30 covert informants, for $92,000. 4 clandestine meetings netted him cash and a travel watch. Back home, he spent freely, triggering FBI suspicion. Arrested in 1980, Barnett pled guilty to 3 espionage counts, and on January 9, 1981, became the first career CIA officer sentenced for spying. 18 years in federal prison. Paroled in 1990 and dead 3 years later, Barnett left behind shattered Indonesian networks and a new directive at Langley: mandatory financial audits for officers with unexplained wealth, a rule written in the betrayed blood of local agents. Case 9. Dwayne Claridge. A legend in covert action circles, Dwayne Dewey Claridge ran paramilitary operations from Latin America to Afghanistan. As the CIA's chief architect of the Nicaraguan Contra program, Claridge funneled weapons and cash to anti-Sandinista rebels. defying congressional bans and twisting legal gray zones until they snapped. Indicted in 1991 for perjury and false statements, he was accused of lying to Congress about his role in secret arms shipments. Claridge maintained he was shielding national security, not personal gain. Before his trial concluded, President George H.W. Bush granted him a pardon in December 1992, erasing legal consequences. The Iran-Contra affair scarred Claridge's legacy. His brilliance in shadow warfare was forever tied to the question, where is the line between patriotism and lawlessness when secrets become policy? The case stands as a warning that unchecked covert power can turn loyal officers into criminal suspects, their reputations clouded by the very ambiguity they once exploited. Case 10. E. Howard Hunt. Famous as both master spy and Watergate burglar, E. Howard Hunt's resume reads like a spy novel gone off-script. After decades orchestrating CIA coups from Guatemala to Cuba, Hunt retired, only to resurface as a leader of the White House plumbers. In June 1972, he helped organize the break-in at the DNC headquarters, planting listening devices and gathering dirt for Nixon's re-election. The operation imploded, exposing ties back to the Oval Office. Hunt pled guilty to burglary, conspiracy, and wiretapping, receiving a sentence of 2.5 to 8 years. He served 33 months at Allenwood and Danbury federal prisons. Released in 1977, Hunt published books and kept his secrets, but Watergate sealed his fate. The man who once toppled foreign leaders became a cautionary tale of how dirty tricks at home can bring down an empire and its spy masters. Case 11. Edwin P. Wilson. Wilson's story is a study in double lives and double crosses. Once a CIA logistics officer, he left the agency but kept his hands in the clandestine cookie jar, brokering deals and supplying agents, until he went rogue. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Wilson shipped more than 20 tons of plastic explosives to Libya, trained Gaddafi's terror squads, and built an arms empire worth millions. Arrested in 1982, he was tried on multiple charges, including illegal arms exports and conspiracy to murder federal officials. Wilson was sentenced to 52 years in federal prison, a record for an ex-CIA operative. He spent over 2 decades behind bars before his conviction was partially overturned, owing to government misconduct. Wilson's rise and fall proved that, when oversight fails, even the best trained operatives can become their own worst enemy, blurring the line between patriot and international outlaw. Case 12. Enrique Ruiz Williams. A Cuban exile and Bay of Pigs veteran, Enrique Harry Ruiz Williams lived for high-risk operations. Though not formally on CIA payroll during his later years, his career was deeply intertwined with agency anti-Castro plots and paramilitary activities throughout the Cold War. In the post-CIA era, he became involved in murky private ventures, crossing paths with U.S. law enforcement. He was convicted on weapons and conspiracy charges stemming from a failed anti-Castro plot, earning prison time for unauthorized military activity. Though less famous than other Watergate or Iran-Contra figures, Ruiz Williams's fate illustrated the perilous afterlife of CIA paramilitaries. Trained for deniable wars, they sometimes drifted into gray ops and freelance adventurism, eventually falling foul of the very laws they once skirted for national security. His conviction is a reminder that the machinery of covert action leaves lasting scars, both on foreign battlefields and in American courtrooms. Case 13. Eugenio Martinez. A Bay of Pigs survivor and longtime CIA asset, Eugenio Muscolito Martinez spent years fighting Castro before being recruited by E. Howard Hunt for the Watergate operation. As one of the 5 burglars arrested inside the DNC headquarters in June 1972, Martinez was the only active CIA informant on the job, tasked with picking locks and planting bugs. Charged with burglary, conspiracy, and wiretapping, he pleaded guilty and received a sentence of 1 to 4 years, serving 15 months at Danbury Federal Prison. After his release, Martinez was quietly pardoned by President Reagan in 1983, a gesture that left many wondering whether loyalty to the company ever truly ends. His time behind bars exposed the blurred boundary between government-sanctioned dirty tricks and outright criminality, a lesson for every agency handler tempted to repurpose field assets for domestic espionage. Case 14. Frank Sturgis. Born Frank Fiorini. Sturgis's path wound from mafia enforcer to anti-Castro guerrilla to CIA contract operative. By the 1960s, he was training exile fighters in Miami under agency cover. Recruited for the Watergate break-in, Sturgis brought street smarts and lock-picking skills. Like his co-conspirators, he was convicted of burglary, conspiracy, and wiretapping, and sentenced to up to 8 years, ultimately serving 14 months at Danbury Prison. Sturgis emerged with his bravado intact, later claiming his covert exploits were for patriotic reasons. But his criminal conviction highlighted the danger of letting covert warriors off the leash. In the wrong hands, the skills that destabilize enemy governments can upend democracy at home, turning once trusted agents into convicted felons. Case 15. Frank Turple. A dark legend in CIA lore, Frank Turple started as an agency officer in the 1960s before shifting to global arms dealing. He and partner Ed Wilson, see above, sold weapons, explosives, and mercenary services to dictators and terrorists, including Libya's Gaddafi and Uganda's Idi Amin. In 1980, a U.S. grand jury indicted Turple for illegally exporting arms and for conspiracy to commit murder of Libyan dissidents. Turple fled the country, living on the run in Lebanon and later Syria, tried in absentia and sentenced to 53 years in prison. He never served a day behind American bars, but his conviction remains a black mark on the agency's history, proof that the clandestine world's moral ambiguities can breed outright criminality, and that sometimes justice is only half served when the guilty vanish overseas. Case 16. Harold James Nicholson. Nicholson's betrayal shocked the intelligence community to its core. Rising through the ranks to become the highest-ranking CIA officer ever convicted of espionage, he began spying for Russia in the mid-1990s, selling secrets about agency personnel, operations, and students at the CIA's farm for over $300,000. Caught failing polygraphs and tracked during clandestine meetings, Nicholson was arrested at Dulles Airport in 1996. He pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage and received 23 years and 7 months in federal prison. Even behind bars, he tried to orchestrate more spying, recruiting his son to deliver information to Russian handlers, a scheme that earned him an additional 8 years. Nicholson's case is taught at Langley as the ultimate warning. Sometimes the greatest threat comes not from the outside, but from the trusted heart of the agency itself. Case 17. Hugh Francis Redmond. Hugh Redmond's story is one of Cold War valor turned tragic. Recruited by the CIA after World War II, Redmond was sent undercover as a businessman to Shanghai in 1946. His real mission: build a network against the rising Chinese Communist Party. In 1951, Redmond was captured by Chinese authorities and, despite fierce denials, was unmasked as a CIA operative. He spent nearly 20 years in brutal solitary confinement, enduring relentless torture and deprivation in Shanghai's Tilankyo prison. In 1970, Redmond died in custody, officially ruled a suicide by wrist slashing, though colleagues and family suspected foul play. While never tried in a U.S. court, his imprisonment and death as a captured CIA officer remain a solemn reminder of the risks American operatives face and the silent graves that mark intelligence failures abroad. For Redmond, there was no rescue, only a lonely cell and the fading hope of freedom. Case 18. James W. McCord, Jr. A former CIA officer turned Watergate burglar, James McCord played a pivotal role in the scandal that toppled a presidency. As the security coordinator for the committee to re-elect the president, McCord oversaw the break-in at the DNC's headquarters in June 1972. Arrested at the scene, he soon became the first Watergate defendant to break ranks, penning a letter to Judge John Sirica that exposed the full breadth of the cover-up. McCord was convicted of conspiracy, burglary, and wiretapping, and sentenced to 1 to 5 years in prison, serving just 4 months after cooperating with authorities. His decision to reveal the truth ignited a chain reaction of confessions, making him both a criminal and a catalyst for transparency. McCord's legacy is tangled, a spy whose illegal acts brought justice not just to himself, but to the corridors of American power. Case 19. Jeffrey W. Castelli. As CIA station chief in Rome, Jeffrey Castelli orchestrated one of the most controversial operations of the War on Terror, the 2003 kidnapping of Egyptian cleric Hassan Mustafa Osama Nasser, also known as Abu Omar, from a Milan street. This extraordinary rendition, carried out with Italian intelligence's help, violated local law and international norms. Italian prosecutors charged Castelli and 22 other Americans with kidnapping. Tried and convicted in absentia in 2013, Castelli received a 7-year sentence, though he never served time due to diplomatic immunity and the lack of extradition. The case became a flashpoint in transatlantic relations, illustrating the legal and ethical gray zones that can ensnare CIA officers working abroad. Castelli's conviction, though symbolic, forced hard questions about how far the U.S. would go in the name of security and how far its operatives could run from foreign justice. Case 20. John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou was once celebrated as a counterterrorism hero, helping lead the capture of al-Qaeda operative Abu Zubaydah. But in 2007, Kiriakou publicly confirmed that the CIA used waterboarding, igniting national debate about torture. By 2012, he was indicted for disclosing the name of a covert operative to a reporter, violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. Kiriakou pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, becoming the first CIA officer jailed for leaking classified information, not for participating in torture. Released in 2015, he emerged as a whistleblower icon to some and a traitor to others. His case drew attention to the agency's treatment of internal dissent, the power of secrecy, and the cost paid by those who challenge the official story. Kiriakou's imprisonment sparked ongoing debates about ethics, transparency, and the true meaning of loyalty. Case 21. John T. Downey. At just 22, John Downey became the youngest CIA officer captured during the Cold War. In 1952, Downey and fellow officer Richard Fecteau were shot down over China during a covert mission to extract an agent. Both were tried by Chinese authorities and sentenced to life imprisonment as spies. Downey languished in harsh conditions for over 20 years before his release in 1973, following years of secret negotiations and shifting diplomatic tides. Though never tried or sentenced in a U.S. court, Downey's decades behind bars were the direct result of clandestine service. His ordeal stands as a stark testament to the dangers CIA operatives face and the political risks of covert action gone awry. After his return, Downey lived a quiet life as a Connecticut judge, a reminder that sometimes the longest sentences are carried out in silence and far from home. Case 22, Joshua Adam Schulte. Joshua Schulte's name is now synonymous with digital betrayal. A gifted CIA software engineer, Schulte helped build some of the agency's most sophisticated cyber tools, until his relationship with management soured. In 2017, Schulte was identified as the source of the Vault 7 leaks, the largest theft of classified cyber espionage material in CIA history, published by WikiLeaks. His crimes didn't stop at espionage. Investigators also uncovered thousands of images and videos of child sexual abuse on his encrypted devices. In February 2024, Schulte was sentenced to 40 years in prison for espionage, computer hacking, and possession of child sexual abuse material. The CIA called his betrayal exceptionally grave, with catastrophic operational impact. Schulte's case is a chilling reminder of how a single insider can cripple a nation's intelligence, combining technical genius with devastating disloyalty. Case 23, Kyle Dusty Foggo. As the CIA's third highest-ranking officer, Kyle Foggo wielded enormous influence over agency contracts and operations, but his fall was as rapid as his rise. Foggo was indicted in 2007 for steering millions in CIA contracts to his friend Brent Wilkes, accepting lavish gifts, and manipulating agency hiring practices for personal gain. In 2009, he pleaded guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison, plus 2 years of supervised release. The case was part of a broader network of corruption that ensnared other high-profile figures. Foggo's conviction forced the agency to confront issues of internal corruption, conflicts of interest, and accountability at the highest levels. His story warns that even in the clandestine world, greed can trump allegiance, and the law eventually catches up with those who believe themselves untouchable. Case 24, Larry Wu-Tai Chin. Larry Chin was the CIA's man in the East, trusted translator, expert on Chinese affairs, and secretly a mole for Beijing. Over 3 decades, Chin passed classified documents and insights to China, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars and betraying countless U.S. operations. In 1985, Chin was arrested and charged with espionage, conspiracy, and tax evasion. Convicted in 1986, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 25 years. Chin never served his full sentence. He died by suicide in his cell just days after conviction. The shockwaves from his betrayal ran deep. Chin's ability to operate undetected for so long forced a reevaluation of CIA vetting, oversight, and the vulnerability posed by those entrusted with America's secrets. His case remains one of the most damaging in agency history, a lesson in the dangers of trust misplaced. Case 25, Nada Nadim Pruti. Nada Nadim Pruti's rise through U.S. law enforcement was meteoric. A Lebanese immigrant who became an FBI special agent, then a CIA operations officer with access to sensitive counterterrorism missions. But in 2005, the facade crumbled. Prouty pleaded guilty to fraudulently obtaining U.S. citizenship and security clearances by lying about her marriage status, as well as illegally accessing FBI files about Hezbollah investigations. Her actions, though not espionage for a foreign power, compromised intelligence protocols and shook public confidence. In 2008, she was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, 2 years of probation, and stripped of her citizenship, later restored by a judge due to prosecutorial errors. Pruti's story remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of internal vulnerabilities. Even without malicious intent, cutting corners for personal reasons can endanger national security and derail careers built on trust. For the CIA, it was a stark lesson in the importance of rigorous vetting and continuous monitoring. Case 26. Raymond Allen Davis. Raymond Davis operated in the murky world where CIA cover meets international crisis. In January 2011, while serving as a CIA contractor in Lahore, Pakistan, Davis shot and killed 2 men he claimed were attempting to rob him. The incident spiraled into a diplomatic nightmare, triggering mass protests, anti-American outrage, and a standoff between Washington and Islamabad. Davis was arrested and charged with double murder. The U.S. government insisted on diplomatic immunity, but Pakistani authorities refused. After 49 days in a Lahore jail, Davis was released when blood money was paid to the victims' families, a traditional resolution under Pakistani law. Davis's time behind bars, though brief, left a lasting mark on U.S.-Pakistan relations and cast a harsh spotlight on CIA operations overseas. His case remains a study in the risks and repercussions when covert action collides with local law and public sentiment. Case 27. Richard Fecteau. Richard Fecteau, like his colleague John Downey, was a casualty of Cold War cloak and dagger gone wrong. In 1952, the young CIA paramilitary officer was shot down over China during a secret mission to recover an agent. Captured, Fecteau was convicted of espionage by Chinese authorities and sentenced to life in prison. He spent 19 years in captivity, enduring harsh conditions and uncertain hope, before finally being released in 1971. Though he was never tried in the U.S., Fecteau's long imprisonment stands as a silent testament to the hazards of covert service. After his return, he faded into quiet civilian life, his sacrifice largely unsung. The legacy of Fecteau's ordeal is a sobering reminder of the real, often invisible, costs borne by those who serve in the shadows, where not all sentences are handed down in American courts, and not all prisoners wear orange. Case 28. Robert Seldon. Lady. Robert Seldon Lady, former CIA station chief in Milan, became a symbol of post-9/11 rendition's legal perils. In 2003, he led the abduction of Egyptian cleric Abu Omar, snatched from a Milan street, and secretly flown to Egypt for interrogation. The operation, executed without Italian government consent, triggered a major international scandal when uncovered by Italian prosecutors. Tried in absentia in 2009 alongside other CIA officers, Lady was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 9 years in prison, later reduced on appeal. While he avoided extradition and never served time, Lady's conviction upended diplomatic norms and forced the CIA to reckon with the global consequences of covert action. His case remains a precedent-setting example of how American operatives can be held to account in foreign courts, and how legal and moral boundaries blur in the war on terror. Case 29. Sabrina de Sousa. A dual U.S.-Portuguese citizen and seasoned CIA officer, Sabrina de Sousa found herself entangled in the Abu Omar rendition fallout. Accused of helping coordinate the cleric's 2003 kidnapping, de Sousa was tried and convicted in absentia by an Italian court in 2009, receiving a 7-year sentence. In 2015, she was detained in Portugal on a European arrest warrant and nearly extradited to Italy, a fate ultimately avoided after diplomatic negotiations and a partial pardon. De Sousa has maintained she was a scapegoat, insisting she operated under government orders. Her ordeal highlighted the hazards CIA officers face when international law collides with covert mandates. De Sousa's case became a lightning rod for debate about individual accountability versus institutional responsibility, underscoring the uncertain legal terrain American spies tread abroad. Case 30. Sharon Scranage. Sharon Scranage was a low-profile CIA secretary whose romantic entanglement had devastating consequences. Stationed in Ghana in the early 1980s, Scranage fell for Michael Susudi, a Ghanaian intelligence officer. Over time, she leaked classified information, including the identities of CIA informants and details of U.S. operations, to her lover. The breach led to the arrest and imprisonment of several Ghanaian agents. On her return to the U.S., Scranage failed a polygraph test, confessed, and was arrested in 1985. She pleaded guilty to unauthorized disclosure of classified information and was sentenced to 5 years in prison, serving 2 before being paroled. Her case became an infamous warning inside the agency that even those far from the field can inflict irreparable damage if they let their guard down. Case 31. Thomas G. Clines. Thomas Clines, a veteran of covert wars in Cuba and Southeast Asia, became infamous as a central figure in the Iran-Contra scandal. As a senior CIA officer turned private arms dealer, Clines used his contacts to facilitate illegal arms sales to Iran and secret funding for the Nicaraguan Contras. In 1990, he was convicted of 4 felony counts for failing to report income from these clandestine deals and for tax fraud, netting millions from operations that skirted both U.S. law and congressional oversight. Clines was sentenced to 16 months in prison and fined $40,000. His downfall illustrated how the entrepreneurial spirit fostered by decades of covert action could metastasize into criminal enterprise when left unchecked, exposing the blurred lines between patriotism, profit, and criminality. Case 32. William Campeels. Disillusioned with his low-level role at the CIA, William Campeels sought excitement and fortune the wrong way. In 1977, after just 8 months as a clerk, he stole a top-secret KH-11 spy satellite manual and sold it to the Soviets for a paltry $3,000. The KGB used the information to enhance their counter-surveillance capabilities, dealing a significant blow to U.S. intelligence. Campeels's plot unraveled when he foolishly bragged to a CIA security officer, triggering an investigation and arrest. Convicted in 1978 on 6 counts of espionage, Campeels received a 40-year prison sentence. He was paroled after 18 years, his name forever associated with betrayal born of boredom and resentment. Campeels's story is a lasting lesson on the dangers of disgruntlement within intelligence ranks and the outsized consequences a single act of greed can unleash.